Hello and welcome back to our Top Tips for SMEs series with me, Philip King, and Blue Chain. I'm excited to introduce Emma Philpott, who is Chief Exec of IASME. It's an accreditation body, but I'll let Emma explain exactly what that means and what it does. Emma, please introduce yourself and throw a bit more light on IASME for us, and then take us through your top three tips.
Thank you very much. So IASME is so our day job is we do cybersecurity certifications, a wide range of them. Actually, our purpose as a company is to try and make things more fair and accessible in cybersecurity. So our certifications are part of that. We are best known for being the sole delivery partner for Cyber Essentials for the UK government. So that's kind of what we spend most of our time doing. And that's most of our experience comes from that. In terms of our top tips, so these top tips are from the things that we see in the day job, mainly Cyber Essentials, but also our other certification schemes that we do. So the first top tip is put a little bit of time aside, maybe once a month, to check the basic cybersecurity controls that they're in place. So the most important controls can be put in place for free. They just take a little bit of time of going into the settings on your computer or the other devices that you use in your work and making sure that the security controls in those settings are switched on. I mean, that sounds really simple, doesn't it? But if anyone has tried going into the settings, it can be quite complex trying to find all the different little pathways that you go. But yeah, take some time to put the free security controls that are already in place, activate them. The second top tip I have is make yourself think what would happen if you had a cyber attack and all your computers, all your network was frozen up, if it was all encrypted and you could no longer get access. It's a horrible thing to think of, and everyone hopes it will never happen to them. But if you can just make yourself think it through, okay, I was online and everything locks itself. What would you do? By thinking it through, it means that if it does happen, you are way better prepared than if you had just not thought about it at all. My third top tip is use two-factor authentication in as many places as you can. So this is, you activate it, and then when you try and log in, you'll put in a password, and then it will use another way of authenticating. So you'll get a text or an email, or you'll have to put in a number from a Google app, for example. That really, really helps many of the cyber attacks that we see. It's very, very powerful. So those are my three top tips.
Thank you very much indeed, Emma. Some really practical and some essential advice there. I'm delighted we're now being joined by Tim Annis, who is Chief Exec of Blue Chain, as we delve a bit deeper into Emma's three tips.
Thanks, Philip.
Emma, you talked about three tips. The first one was putting some time aside to put the basic security controls in place. And you talked about settings that are there, but we just don't switch on. Can you talk us through that a bit more, please?
Yes, I think it's a very good assumption that you buy a computer from a shop, and when you get it out of the box and set it up, that surely it's set up securely, and that is not the case. It is getting a little bit better, but generally a lot of the security controls that are free and come with the device and really, really important are off when you first set it up. And so it's really important when you first get a device, or if you haven't done it like now, to just go into the security settings and, for example, where it says firewall, which actually sort of protects you from all the bad stuff on the internet, switch it on. If it's not already on, switch it on. And there's many, many things like that. And things like, do you want to automatically update software? That's also really important. You can just say yes. And that then, just by doing that, means you are way more secure. And it just is a whole headache taken away from you. So there's lots of things like that you can just go in, set up, it's free, it's already there, just needs to be switched on.
And I'll interject on that because I know there's lots of stuff on there, and I'm reasonably tech savvy. Some of my team would probably disagree, but but I'm reasonably tech savvy. But sometimes, you know, I'm very, very time poor. And you go like, okay, I'll go to the settings, and then it's a whole bunch of stuff, and you're like, if I press one of these buttons, what am I going to turn off? What's going to not work? Oh God, you know, I've got that meeting in an hour. That type of stuff. Yeah, pick your moments probably is perhaps the first thing. Do it at a time when you have got plenty of time to think about these things. But are there any resources or places you can go to sort of go, right, I've got a Mac. What should I think about? What are the things I should switch on? What do I need to consider perhaps? Is there anywhere we
Well,
can get?
so it's really difficult because, of course, it keeps changing. You know, the Macs keep changing, they keep updating stuff, which is good. So one of the things you can do is you can go to the IASME website, and there's something called Get Ready for Cyber Essentials. You can just search Get Ready for Cyber Essentials, and that takes you through the Cyber Essentials controls, which are like the basic 5 controls. There's more questions than that, but basic controls that are really important for staying secure. Now, most of those controls can be done completely for free, especially if you're a small organization. The Get Ready for Cyber Essentials is completely free. It doesn't record who you are, so you can be very honest that you have nothing in place. And it asks you questions like, have you put automatic updates on your computer? And you can, if you don't know what it is, there is loads of guidance, and it will explain what it is, why it's important, and as far as possible, how you do it. So I would really recommend go through the steps in Get Ready for Cyber Essentials. At the end of going through it all, it will give you an action plan of these are still the basic controls that you still need to put in place before you reach the level of Cyber Essentials. Now, Cyber Essentials, you only need to pay for it if you want to be assessed and get a certificate. All the resources are there for free. You know, the guidance, the question set, everything is there for free. And the Cyber Essentials controls have been developed by the UK government to say these are the most important controls. These are the things that should be freely available for you as a small company to put in place. Please do it, because they will, you know, it's been shown to stop 80% of the commodity attacks by just putting in those free controls. And you were saying about being time poor, and you know, I completely get it. We're just too busy, aren't we? We're too busy worrying about how we're going to pay our staff this month to bother spending an hour to do this. But you know, I really wish I could tell people how awful it is to have a cybersecurity breach. You know, it is awful. It can bring your company down. And so although it's really easy to keep putting it off, like when you get a pop-up saying, do you want to update your software? It's really easy to keep saying, not now, not now, not now. But please don't, because by just putting a little bit of time aside, putting in those controls, you will save yourself no end of grief often. So, you know, that's why it's my top tip. Put a little bit of time aside.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real square wheel, round wheel scenario, isn't it? I'm too busy to do this.
Yeah.
Because I'm pushing my cart up the hill with its square wheels. But if I did this, then, you know, if that horrendous event occurred, I wouldn't necessarily be impacted by it. And we see this from a blue chain perspective, because a big part of what we do is helping to cut out fraud. And it's like, well, yeah, I've never been impacted by fraud until you are, and suddenly £30,000 has disappeared, and that was your staff payment for the month because that was your big bill coming in, but some fraudsters got it, and you might get it back.
Yes.
But not necessarily by the end of the month, and it'll take you all of that time that you didn't have to do it.
Yeah, exactly, and it is so awful when it happens. You know, just a few things, and it hits more people than people realize, because obviously nobody wants it to be reported. People often are very secretive about when they have a cyber attack or a fraud incident, and so you don't know the extent of it. That's the problem.
Yeah. So follow on from that, Emma. I mean, you know, if you do this, make time, do it, do all the cyber essential stuff that you should do. Do you then have to revisit that, or does it stay in place? I mean, you know, is there any sort of half-yearly revisit to go back and check that there's nothing changed since last time?
So most of it will just carry on. If you do things like automated updates, then that will mean that the software stays in date. The firewall, once it's on, is on. I think it's worth maybe once every 6 months just checking, but probably most of it is done once you've done it. It's worth keeping ahead of what the controls are in Cyber Essentials. Even if you never pay a single penny and you never get a certificate, just check what the controls are. So, for example, cloud was not included in Cyber Essentials 3 years ago. But since everyone went online since COVID, and everyone suddenly started working remotely, cloud, everyone is on the cloud now, and it is the playground of the cyber criminals. They break into the cloud, and so now Cyber Essentials controls, including two-factor authentication, are in. You have to do them for your cloud services as well, and that's because they've just seen so many attacks in that way. So it is really important now, whereas it was less important before. So just kind of keeping up to date with what the controls are would be useful.
Okay, thank you. Your second tip was about make yourself think through what you would do if you were, if all your computers locked up as a result of a cyber attack. What should you do?
Well, it's things like, and this is, so we do an instant exercise every year. And, no one really wants to do it. It's like, oh, I'm sure we're fine at an incident. And then you sit around the table and someone says, okay, so let's pretend that we get a ransomware. Someone clicked on a link, which is really easy to do. I clicked on a link the other day and I had to confess it to our IT department. Really easy to do. Someone clicked on a link and all our computers are locked up. What would you do? It's like, well, we'd contact everyone. And it's like, well, how would you contact everyone? Oh, yeah, good point. We can't use email, and all their email addresses are locked, and I don't have their phone numbers except on my computer. So what would you do? And so just thinking it through, you think, oh, okay, let's have a hard copy of everyone's phone numbers in the safe in the office. Oh, great. So that's that. And then you go on to the next stage. Okay, then what would you do? And it's like, oh, but I can't do that. I can't Google. How would I work without Google? Okay, I need to have another phone that is not my work phone, that isn't affected by this, that I can then Google the phone number of the company that we're going to ask to help us. So it's just these little things that until you start thinking it through, you would find yourself in a complete hole without anything to do. And it's a horrible thing to think through, and hopefully, it'll never happen. But it just means you're more prepared if you think it through.
Okay, and in a similar way to the system locking down from a cyber attack, I leave my phone on the train, or I leave my bag with my phone and my iPad on the train, or whatever. What do I do in that circumstance?
Well, it's very similar. It's just it's you thinking through now. What would I do? And obviously, it completely depends on whether you've got sensitive information on it, whether you've got two-factor authentication on your phone, whether you've got a long password to get into your phone. All the things that you can put in place. So I know a lot of people still don't have a security pin on their phone. You can just pick up their phone and use it. And some people, they use it for their payment and everything else, which, it just makes you feel a bit panicky when you think it through. So think it through. Think what you could do, what someone could do if they got your phone or your laptop. And you can make it so that you can remotely wipe them. Because often it's not the value of the laptop or the phone that you're worried about. It's what you can do with it. And so enabling the auto wipe, for example, the remote wipe facility, maybe when you think it through, you think, oh, I'll enable that. And then if I have lost it, I can just wipe it. And then someone's just left with a blank laptop. So yeah, just thinking it through.
Okay. Tim, anything you want to add on that one before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just echoing what you're saying here, but the existential terror of losing your phone or your laptop, my laptop is my business, is my life in lots of different ways. It doesn't mean everything's on there, like lots of it's in the cloud, so I wouldn't lose the data, but obviously it's my access to it. And as you say, you're like, well, I'll just Google it, won't I? How are you going to do that? You've lost your phone and your laptop. I don't even know my wife's phone number.
No,
I don't need to, right? Because it's on my devices. Yeah. Well, I need to, and then I don't know it. I can still phone my old family home. Hopefully, the people who live there now will be able to help me. Right? That's about it. So,
who are you?
Yeah, exactly. But that was the sort of the last time I memorized the number and kept it in my head for any sort of period of time. So
yeah.
But yeah, I think this is the critical thing. Right? I have had my, I have lost work laptops. I had them stolen. I have had left phones on trains in the past. I wouldn't sound like I'm totally stupid, but I have done these things,
Yeah.
and it is just awful. Just getting them set back up is a pain. So the act of losing them is a pain. But then there's that, what about that client data and that really sensitive document or whatever it might be, depending on what your business is. And I used to work for American Express. So as a financial institution that's heavily regulated, regularly have sensitive client data or the access to it in theory via those devices. We had very sort of strict and rapid security procedures to do exactly what you just said. So, it probably doesn't matter if you're cutting lawns or something like that, but it doesn't go far to actually, but I have got someone's bank details.
Yeah.
That's sensitive data, right? So, it doesn't just because your job doesn't touch it like a financial institution doesn't mean you don't have something that someone else could use nefariously. So,
Yes. And
anyway,
legally,
yeah.
Legally there is very strict rules now that if you lose personal data, so that would be your staff, their pay details, their bank account, things like that. If you lose that, you have to report it within 72 hours to the ICO. So knowing what you have to report by when is really important as well, because otherwise you can find you've broken the law and you didn't even know it. So anyone who's got cyber essentials, actually paid and got the certificate, which is only £300 for a micro, they automatically get cyber insurance. And this cyber insurance gives 24-hour instant response. Technical, so, oh my gosh, all my laptops have locked up, what should I do? They help you with that. But also legal. So, I've just lost my phone. It's got the bank details of all my staff on it. A lawyer, 24 hours a day, instant response, will tell you, right, this is what you have to do. This is the letter you now have to send all your staff within the next few hours. So just having that kind of insurance can often also be quite useful.
Well, it's just knowing as well, like that checklist of this has happened, what should I do? Oh, and there's my wife's phone number on the top there, so I don't have to phone those random people.
I think the advice about thinking through a scenario before it happens is really helpful, because most of us don't do that. When you have done it, you're then better prepared than you otherwise would be. Emma, you've mentioned a couple of times while we've been chatting two-factor authentication. So just talk us through that and talk us about where and when we should use it.
So the advice used to be use a long, complicated password. And, there's loads of memes out there and jokes about the trying to make your password more complicated. And no, it's got to have a letter and a number and that's all very well until the computer power reaches a certain amount. And we're kind of there. So computers can crack passwords really amazingly quickly now. So I can't remember the stats, but if you've got an 8-character password, even if it's complicated, it can be cracked in a matter of hours by just trying every combination. Now, that didn't used to be possible, but it is now. And also they use things like, if they're spending a little bit more time on it, they will look up things about you. So if you work for a company that employs a lot of people from Australia, they will use Australian dictionaries. If you work for a medical company, they will use medical dictionaries as words trying out with the password. So basically, most passwords can be cracked if they use enough time. Doesn't mean to say you shouldn't have a password that's complicated, but it's the length of the password that is very important. So yes, have a long password, but assume that it can be cracked. And the only thing protecting you, particularly in cloud services, Office 365, your email, don't just rely on a password. It can be cracked. Have two-factor authentication. So when someone cracks your password, that you will get a text or a message saying, oh, here's your little code to put in. And it's like, well, that wasn't me. Don't put the code in. And it stops them accessing. There's so many people who have had their Office 365 email accounts, as an example, breached. They can see all your clients. They can see all the emails you've sent out, all the emails you've got. And what they then do is they pretend to be you. They'll find an email from a client talking about a big deal or a big bill about to come in, and they will pretend to be you, and they will message that client in the same language that you use and say, oh, the bank details have just changed to this, for example. And sure enough, that big payment goes to the cyber criminal's account. There's so much that they can do if they get access. And the thing that saves the day is two-factor authentication. It's fabulous.
Thanks, Emma. That's amazing. And I think we could chat all day on this stuff because it's so fascinating and so important. But sadly, we're out of time. So that just leaves me to thank you, Emma, for your time today and for sharing your top tips, to Tim for adding to the conversation. And if I just leave people with one thought, it's go to the IASME website and look at Get Ready for Cyber Essentials. Look out for the next video in the series, again, as always, at bluechain.com. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks, Emma.
Thank you.